Hi everyone, welcome.
Hi, I'm Jelle.
My name is Steven, and today I want to talk to you about cost management in Azure.
Cost management.
Yes.
So we're trying to be cheap.
Yeah, of course,
Okay,
especially management. No, what I see from a lot of customers is that you get a lot of times the question about how can we reduce cost in Azure, and we went to the cloud and we thought it would be cheaper, but it's more expensive. And we all know that saying. What can I do to have more insight in my cost and especially reduce the cost so it's actually becoming cheaper than running software on premise?
Right.
And what I noticed that a lot of people don't really know how to use the Azure Cost Management, not really utilize the functions that it has. So that's why I want to talk about it today.
All right. So if anyone watching has absurdly high cloud costs, especially in Azure.
Yeah, I hope you didn't wait too long with addressing that issue, but I hope that a lot of people can learn something from these quick wins, because that's what it is, in my opinion.
Yes, because to start, we have like a lot of resource types, and every resource type has its own way of calculating costs. And
yeah, that's the problem with Azure, because you're paying for computing, and only, for example, an Azure function you only pay when you run it, so it's not really upfront hard to determine what is the actual cost of something like that.
Yes, and you need to take into account that if you've built something a certain way, or you've designed something a certain way, your cloud architecture is set up in using method A. If you want to save costs, you might have to change something around. That also has costs associated with it.
Yeah, that's
so you might want to do it first time right, or at least do it in a way where you're flexible for the future.
Yeah, that's exactly. So that's why I want to take a look at this cost management. So if you look at my screen, it's just the Azure portal, nothing fancy, and I can go back to home, but there's just cost management. So it's always bottom right on the home screen, but also when you just type in cost management, it pops up. So this is basically the entire screen we're using today. So that's quite easy to begin with. I will expand all the menu options, and I will go through them one by one to see what we have to what Azure has to offer and how to use everything.
So in this hypothetical scenario, we have a cloud environment. The cost management is on subscription level?
Yeah, so you can, depending on how your Azure subscription, etc., are configured, you can take a look at subscription level or management groups, or even on resource. You can even dive into resource groups and resource types, etc. I will show that in a minute. For now, one thing to remember is that you will need additional rights to view cost management. So could be that if you're just a normal developer at a company, you don't have the access to do that. So check that with your administrator. In my scenario, I have, for this demo purpose, an Azure sponsorship subscription, and I will be diving into there. And I have some resources that are running for months, almost a year even, so we can dive back in history and we can take a look at how that
all right, and you are fully permissioned.
Yes. Yeah. I created this subscription, so I can do everything within this subscription. So the first thing I want to dive into is the cost analysis part. So this is just the main window where you can look at the cost, and the first thing you'll see is that you can create additional tabs. So if you're diving into cost, maybe you want to compare certain things, you can do that within the portal. So you don't have to open tabs within your browser, but you can do that within the cost management screen.
It's a bit of a IDE light.
Yeah, they're really trying to give that a more user experience. Also for people that may not be software developers, but like management or administrators or someone that just wants to have just wants insight in the cost. So what you see is you get some recommendations and big buttons with quick views, and one of them is the daily costs. And if you click on that, it will load up a very nice dashboard, I must say. And I will go into full screen for a second, so it's a bit larger. And in an instant, you can see, okay, what's my cost per day? You can also see in the bottom left what is the cost per resource. So you see Azure App Configuration, front door. There's a container registry. Storage is not a big deal. But also, if you're a global company and you have multiple regions, you can see how your cost is separated over your regions. So, for example, if you have a lot of cost in a specific region, you can dive into that issue from, hey, what's going on there? Is there a lot of traffic, or did we mess something up with deployment?
Right.
And the last is the cost per resource group. So if you have a lot of resource groups, you can see some costs.
And I noticed that they're all drop downs, so you can presumably also...
Yeah, so you can switch these. So if you say, okay, this is not really interesting for me, I want something different, and you can there's a bunch of options. These are options you will see throughout all the filters. So there's a lot of things you can filter on. This is just the 3 that Microsoft says, okay, these are probably the ones you want or the most used, and that's why they are coming up front.
Yep.
One thing is very good to know is that when you're using tags in your deployment, so you're tagging every resource with what department it is, environment or location or even name it, then you can use those tags in your cost analysis. So that's a very good reason to use tags, because that will make it much easier to get cost per department.
No, it's another good reason to use tags, because once your cloud environment gets a little bit bigger, I find that working without tags becomes...
Yeah, it's one of the many good reasons to use it. For now, I will keep those just the default, because they're fine for me.
Yeah, so my first question would be, looking at this screen, okay, so I can see my costs. Is this a lot? Is this not that much? I do not have a frame of reference, especially since I have never seen this subscription before. How would I find out about that?
Well, that's a good question. So the top view is like, it's a day-by-day view, and you can, even if you want to, you can group it by something different. You can switch the output to a table or line area, etc. And you can change the granularity. But at the top, you can adjust the filtering. And this is where it gets interesting, because you can say, okay, I want to see the current billing period, or the last 7 days, or maybe even go a bit further. And you say, oh, I want to see the entire quarter. And it will load up, and then you can see, oh, it's pretty stable. So there's not really much to worry about. So if you see some spikes here, you can know, okay, that could be an issue. In this case, you see it's really stable. It's just, of course, these costs are per day, so it's like between $2 and €2 and $2.50. So that's not really something to worry about. But what's nice to see is that Microsoft also gives you a forecast, and that's the green part in this graphic. And basically, Microsoft is just trying to look at the resource you are using and your past usage of computing, and they're just saying, okay, this is the forecast. We think that this will be your cost in the future.
This is machine learning for dummies to the extreme, I assume.
Yeah. There's a lot of things going on behind it. I don't really know the details of it, but it works pretty well. And it gives you a good view of how it works. So you can see here, okay, Microsoft just says forecast is just basically the same as the past. So
this is great. So I can see, okay, my costs haven't spectacularly increased or decreased. Yeah. Good. I'm not doing something extra stupid. But what if the developer who set it up in the first place just went for the most outrageously expensive option, and now it's stable but very expensive? Is there an option for that?
Exactly, because if you see some spikes here or some dips, then you know, okay, I can zoom in on that period and look at it, and something went wrong at that exact period.
Or it was Christmas and that's expected or something, yeah.
Exactly. But if you have a flat line, it can also it can still be a reason for you to say, okay, maybe we're just always spending a lot, and we can reduce this. So if you want to, you can add additional filters, but you can also zoom in on a specific period. So we're going back and we say, let's say the last 7 days.
Yep.
And if you go into the left bottom, you see, okay, app configuration is using the most because this is sorted on highest price first. So let's dive into app configuration. I clicked on that, and then you can see it adds a filter, service name, app configuration. So you get the cost for only one particular service. And then you can see this is straightforward. It's just always the same price because app configuration has a standard cost. So there's not really something to worry about.
Yeah, so this is actually, if I'm correct, it's not built per day, but this display will divide it out.
Yes, exactly. So the app configuration is a standard amount per month, and it just divides it by the 30, 31 in this case. So that way you can look at it on a more detailed level, but you can also add multiple filters because you want to say, okay, I want to take a look at app configuration for a specific location. In this case, I only have US West, so that's not really useful for me. But if you have multiple resource groups, so let's go back to a different, let's go to, let's see which one, it's Azure Container Apps. So that's this one.
Very, very well known for being absurdly cheap, right?
Yeah. So that's this is a test subscription. It's very cheap. But if you go to the resource group names, so let's say, let's go to this one. Then you can see for a specific resource group, okay, what's the cost for a specific resource group? Because you have multiple resource groups, but you can also have multiple subscriptions, because if you set it up properly, your production will be a separate subscription from your development. And that way you can just fine tune and look at it from, okay, what's going on in a specific resource group or a specific subscription. So that's very detailed in how you can filter it out and how you can look at how the views and how the cost is going per day, per month, etc. You can also change the views, standard for cost per resource. Then you get a different view, this more table view, and then you just see, okay, wait, app configuration is still on top, but you can also see that Cosmos DB and Key Vault. Key Vault is very cheap. So if Key Vault would be on top here, you have some serious digging out.
You're doing something very much right or something very wrong, yeah.
So that's the main part. So the cost analysis screen, where you can really dive into how the costs are going. And of course, especially when you have new features of new services that you're using, it's always hard to predict, okay, what it's going to be.
Yeah, there's calculators for that, but you would need to know exactly what you're going to do to calculate that.
And of course, when you're introducing a new, for example, you're going to use Azure Functions, you always go to the Azure calculator and try to figure out, okay, how much is it going to cost? And you get a budget for that, and they say, okay, it's fine, you can run that. And after 1 month, you're like, oh crap.
Yeah, so
it's a bit more.
It's slightly more, but I now need it. I cannot go back. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's always a tough decision, because it really depends on what you're using and how you configured it. But it gives you more data about what's going on, and you can zoom in on specific services because you can see what are the spikes, what are the resources that are more than I expected, and then you can anticipate on that.
But you reach something interesting here, because you're doing this manually. You are looking. You're opening your browser, you're looking at the portal, you're opening up Cost Management, doing your own filtering. What happens if you go on holiday and nobody is looking, and we overgo the budget by like 100%?
Great question, because what we also, a very, in my opinion, great feature about this Cost Management is that you can also set up alerts and budgets. And that's actually the most important part, because like you said, the cost analysis is where you're going as soon as you figure out, okay, something's wrong, I need to find out what's wrong. But usually you get that trigger because your credit card bill was a lot larger.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw the blog from Troy Hunt that had a similar issue, and he went up in the thousands of euros extra.
Yes.
And he only figured it out 1 to 3 months later because
Now,
he didn't set up any alerts or budgets.
Yeah, now that you've brought it up, we need to link it in the description.
Yeah.
So there we go. No, but that's a great read, especially because it highlights the importance of, as a developer, you tend to be focused on performance and scalability and technical perfection. But for a business, the ongoing cost is one of the most important things, and you, as a developer, we have a responsibility to make sure that cost management is taken into account from the start.
Yeah, and especially because if you're using something like an Azure function that in standard it's dollar works, just euros. It's not a lot, but if you make a mistake or you have a trigger not set up properly and it runs a lot of times more, it really ranks up your credit card bill. So you really want to set up front your alerting and your budgets correctly. So let's go to the alert rules. This is the page where you can set up those alerts, and these are the, let's say, just the easy alerts. Because basically the only thing what you're really saying here is, hey Microsoft, alert me when you think something is going different than what should be.
Hello people who I am paying money, let me know if I'm paying too much money.
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
So I already have one, but I'm going to delete that so I can create a new one.
Because you can only have one, or because
no, it's just because I don't need I don't need more of them.
Okay.
So the alert types you can choose between anonymity, and that's basically just Microsoft saying, okay, something's going wrong, and what they're doing is they're looking at, okay, you have your resource count is different from the past, or your spending is different from the past. So that's basically the two options where they're checking from, this is something we want to alert you about. So that's really basic, but in most cases it can be enough, especially for certain environments or smaller companies, etc.
But this is the same with credit card companies. Well, they'll be like, yeah, hi, you're suddenly spending a lot in India.
Yeah.
Is this you?
Yeah. Exactly. So you can also check reservation utilization, because if you're a large company, most of the times it's way more efficient to get reservations on computing resources or specific resources or contracts for 1 or 3 years or something like that. And basically what this reservation utilization does is alerting you if you're not really using that utilization. So you, for example, you said, okay, we spend a lot of money on a SQL Server and we want to log that in for 3 years, and that budget isn't being used because everything is running in Cosmos, then you can use this to get an alert because your developers are using Cosmos while you're paying for SQL Server, and then you might think, okay, this is not going the way I want it to go.
And this is basically where at the end of the fiscal year, every single subdivision in the company will suddenly start spending money because otherwise their budget will be cut.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So for now, we just pick this one. You can put in a start end date. Well, just keep that simple, and we'll just go into the future. That's not really important. So you can change the subject, because basically what this does is just sends a mail to your account. You can add more recipients if you want to, and you can change the subject, and you can add an additional message if you want to. That's just for demo purpose. I'm not going to bother that. You can also change the language, but this is basically it. It's quite simple. And if you create that, now I have something which alerts me as soon as I add a resource or spend more than I normally do.
You've created now an alert using the portal.
Yeah.
Is it also possible to set up alerts using infrastructure as code or CLI? Or
yes. And that's especially when you're using tags, that can really be a powerful tool, because you can automatically set up alerting for the tags you're creating. So that's also possible, of course, because the portal is lovely for demos, but for production, please try to do as much infrastructure as code as possible. But like I said, this is quite a basic. So you also have budgets. And as you can see, I already have some budgets, but I can create additional ones. And this is where you can go more in depth on how you want to be alerted about certain things. So you have the same filter that you had on the cost analysis part, where you can say, okay, for a specific, let's say a specific resource group name, the general one, if that within 1 month the amount goes above a certain amount, I want to be triggered. And the nice thing about this is that Microsoft also gives you a suggestion based on the history, because they're saying, okay, suggested budget would be $73. So let's say, okay, if we're going over 75, I want an alert.
Yeah.
Demo. So you get so I filled in a name, and then I go to next, and then here you can set up what needs to be happened as soon as that cap is reached.
Right, so with the basic alerts you can send an email, and with budgets you have a lot more options.
Exactly. So first of all, with budgets you can also just use your email addresses. So if you just want, if that works for you and for your organization, and you have a single person that's available, responsible for this, you could use an email address. That's okay. Oh, I'm not doing this. Oh, well, I'm going ahead of myself. But first of all, you got to go and set up some conditions. So there's 2 conditions where you can choose from. As soon as the forecasted cap is being reached and the actual cap is being reached. So in this case, I want to say, okay, if forecast says I'm going to hit that amount, then I want to be alerted. But you can also say, okay, if forecast is on 50% of that budget, I already want to be alerted. But in this case, it's just a forecast. It's not really happening yet. So if it hits, that's fine.
But you could also set it to 120, I assume, where you're like, okay, I don't trust the forecast fully. If the forecast is really negative, I want to be alerted. Otherwise,
you can also set it for 120, 130, 130. That every 10% you can get mail, if that works for you. But I don't recommend it.
Correct.
And what I also want is, okay, if it actually hits 80%, so it also gives you what that actual amount would be, then I also want to be reminded, and if it actually is 100%, I want another alert, because I really need to do something about this. So you can also define action groups, and now I've defined none, but and if you don't define any action groups, it just use the mail recipients and that's it. And for my demo purpose, I will leave it with that. But if you want to use action groups, you can use them, and these are basically the same action groups that are also used for application insights and advisory, at everything to notify within your organization. And that's where you can go more in depth, because it supports text messages, voice calling, mails to groups, organizations. That's what you probably want to set up, so it's more proper defined, and an entire organization or entire department gets notified the right amount. So if you hit 100%, you probably want a bit more urgent action defined than if you hit the forecast on 100%.
But we're taping this during the summer holidays. If you would now send a desperate email to the finance of some of the customers I met, you would get out an office. Sorry, I'm not there. I want to make sure that if my budget is reached, something happens. I want to automate the next step. Is that possible?
Yeah, so you can also just, because if you, so the most drastic option you have is just say, okay, if this budget is reached, shut down. You're not getting more money from me, Microsoft.
Yeah.
But I don't recommend that for production, because that just means everything is going down. But that could be something you could set up, for example, your dev environment.
Right.
And then probably you don't want to set it on 100%, but if you say 120, 130%, you just say, listen, shut it down, let the devs figure out what's going on, and then we can just upgrade the cap a bit more.
So you can set an action group to be an action of notification, but you can also set up an action group to actually be an action.
Yeah, so the action groups, you can even use webhooks. There's a lot of options.
Logic apps
is also an option.
So you can do anything basically.
Basically anything. Azure Functions, of course, also an option. So you can really use that to more refined take action on certain causes. So for now, I just create this one. And then you can see I have an additional one. And you can do this for resource types, for resource groups, and you can really refine this for specific departments of specific resource, specific products.
Yep.
So that's really really nice to set up.
I do notice that you haven't really told me the answer to the question. If I have no idea how much something should cost, how would I be able to use this properly? So of course, I can. It's very awesome that like all the past, the present, and the future are all taken into account, and I can use that to set up and configure all kinds of actions. Is that the scope of cost management, or can it also basically tell you you might want to look into these quick little cost savers?
Yeah. So you also have some under the optimization. You have some additional options. The major one is the advisory recommendations. Unfortunately, because for this demo, I don't really have any recommendations because I'm a good developer.
Hi.
But if you're not, or if you're just starting out, you can...
you can send your screenshots to us.
No, this screen will tell you from Microsoft perspective, listen, this is something you can fine-tune so it costs you a lot less money.
Yeah.
For example, resources that are not used anymore, or resources that are, let's say you have a VM that's always running but not logged in, that's really something that's costing a lot. So maybe you can turn it off and only turn it on when you're using it, that kind of stuff. That's the advisor recommendations. It's good to know if you go to a specific resource, you also get that recommendations options. But this is a more global screen where you can get the recommendation for all your resources within a specific subscription. Yeah,
so this is something where you would check in periodically to see, are we still doing the right thing right?
Exactly. So you can also go to reservations. Reservations are if you're a larger company and you want to make a big reservation because you're saying, okay, we're spending like in the example I previously used, if you know you're going to use SQL Server for the next 3 years, it's much cheaper to just reserve that and just say, okay, we're at least going to use this amount, so we just want to reserve this for the next 3 years.
Buy 3, pay for 2. That idea.
Yeah, for some certain resources it can go the cost efficiency go up to 70%. So it's really worth the effort. Because from Microsoft perspective, it just means they know for the next 3 years this is the hardware they're going to need, this is the computing they're going to provide to you. So it gives them also a bigger forecast of their utilization of their cloud resources.
Yeah, so you can also set up alerts the other way where you're like, hey, we're not spending enough on this, right?
Exactly. So if you're new to Azure or you're using a lot of different resources, a reservation might not be a perfect fit because you're not really using one resource a lot, but you're looking around. Mm-hmm. That's also where saving plans can come handy, because in that case you can just say, okay, Microsoft, I'm committing myself to this amount of money for 1 year or 3 years, and then Microsoft also says for computing power. And then Microsoft says, okay, then I can also give you a discount. The discount's of course a little bit less than if you're saying you're committing to a specific resource. But at the same time, you still get a discount and you have the freedom to switch from SQL to Cosmos if you want to without losing that reserved money.
Basically, Microsoft is paying you to, if you have some amount of certainty of usage or intent in your company, if you are transparent about that in Azure, then Microsoft is willing to reward that transparency.
Yeah, because once again, it gives them just a forecast and they know that for the next three years you're going to be their customer. So that's...
and also what resources they need to have at the ready. Yeah,
exactly. So that's kind of what cost management gives you. And I think it's a very good tool because you can go really in depth. And I think this is really something that you don't really have on premise. You got to figure it out yourself. Of course, you have a lot of more resources, so it's more harder to maintain, but it gives you more insight in what's going on. Yeah. And as soon as you see a specific resource of a specific resource group is using a lot of money, you can go in there, you can get advice, is this normal or is this not normal? You can go to the calculator, you can fill in your options and you can see.
Yeah, and with the upcoming Copilot in Azure, you'll even be able to ask about it, so we'll get all the more options.
Exactly.
So you mentioned that it's not necessarily usual, but it's not always that a developer will have access to cost management on production.
Yeah.
I would let me formulate it as a question. Do you think developers should have access to cost management on development resources and maybe like test environments to see the effect of their
Definitely, because
choices?
I experience a lot of times that a developer says, oh, but I thought Azure Functions would be cheap. Yeah, of course, but if you're running them 10,000 times per hour, they're not. And if you're using a durable function or premium functions, they're not, because they're more expensive.
Right.
And you want that insight as soon as possible, because if you're hitting production, it's so much harder to do something about it. And if you're hitting it in development, maybe there's still time to just reconsider if it's the best resource or if you need to use something different.
So if you started this talk thinking, oh, does this apply to me? And you've stuck it all the way to here.
That's respect.
It should apply to you, not necessarily on production, but if you're the type of company that does that, then maybe. But if you are a developer, this is also a tool for your development environment, your test environment.
And it also gives you more knowledge as a developer, so you can give your customer or your boss some recommendation. Listen, Cosmos sounds great, but do know it's more expensive. So you need to fully use that features, because otherwise there are alternatives.
We've been using SQL Server for 5 years now. We could get a discount. I know how.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
thanks so much for showing this.
Yeah, I want to give two takeaways. It's also possible to use exports, so you can export the entire data into a storage account. That could be set up once in a time or monthly. And that way you can extract that, for example, an Azure function from that storage account, and you can use it in your internal tooling or your
quarterly reports, your Power BIs, whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. And what's also nice is that you can also link your Amazon AWS services into the portal, so you get an integrated look of cost in both Azure and AWS if you're using both services.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep in mind.
Cool.
So that's cost management in a nutshell.
All right. I hope we saved you a lot of money. Thank you so much.
See ya.
Bye-bye.